we're going to talk about Simulator, which has two tools in it. And then I'm going to tease leadership. Good morning, Bob. And
Good morning, Scott.
the leadership module is interesting. I'm going to be fascinated to learn how you all use it in your engagements. And Simulator is pretty straightforward. Let's take 3 years of numbers, this year, last year, 2 years ago, gross and net. Compare you, benchmark you against your industry, benchmark your margins against your industry, and then project going forward. Here's how you're growing historically. Here's how your industry is growing. And here's how you've said you're going to grow. And it's live. No big bells are being rung yet, but it's live in your dashboard. Side note, we're going to be reconfiguring the buttons, what buttons are visible from which screens, et cetera. Right now, they're all there, which is helpful if you're familiar with the system, but I'm going to start, we're going to connect them to what we think is a logical process. And then we have a new module where, I said, this is it, we're done. Well, we're almost done. We have another module that's going to help you all collaborate with strategic COIs. And then anyway, it's pretty cool. And they're coding that report that I shared parts of a report with everyone, and they're coding that right now.
Okay.
In fact, I anticipate that am free this morning if the engineering team is hammering away. We're trying
George,
the new report. Yeah, Joe.
Ed and I presented that simulator on Friday with one of my 5 steps group. Went well. I thought the simulation piece was really interesting for them to kind of understand what kind of growth rate was possible. It was $1 million. I think she was doing $1.2 million last year. Decent profitability. And it's just like, well, don't you want to have 3 years experience, 3 years back, look back on evaluation? And said, well, it's not exactly the way we worked at. And so it was really beneficial for her to just understand where they're going with it. The question I have, and I'm sure I'll probably get more of it tomorrow, is how do we produce that report? Because right now there's no way to kind of pull it from a PDF. At least I didn't see it. So I'll be interested in hearing more about that tomorrow. So
Awesome.
But I think it was a great step in for the connecting the dots between their growth pattern and how the forecasting piece. I like that the dynamic. I like the word you used there, and that it's more than just worrying about your nest egg. It's looking at the growth and look at historical industry growth. Really challenges the question of how fast you can really grow this thing.
Yes.
And I've been, my company has been involved with the Fast 50 years ago, and when that you have that incredible growth year over year, it really wears on the organization. You have to kind of plan to plateau it and then regrow again. So
yes,
I think that's a really good.
Joe, it's funny. That's several great points I'd like to address. I'll start with the report out of Simulator. Yes, as soon as we have the strategic capacity and business value report coded, you will see we will have the framework for doing some follow-on reports. An addendum, if you will, a very short report that talks about equity value planning. And then a strategic planning report. Let me explain why that's the strategic planning report. We want to be able to, I'm hoping that you guys, and I'd love your feedback, we can't generate a push button strategic plan. It would be, it's kind of being a Pollyanna. Now we're getting into a level of complexity and customization with the client. However, what we can produce is a report and perhaps something that's easily translatable into an attendant PowerPoint that y'all can use to, I've started using spontaneous y'alls. That, that I've been back in the South long enough, that you can use for educating the client. Here are the things we should be considering in a strategic plan. So this report has all of the ingredients we can pull from the level 2 analysis, the ROI calculator, the simulator, the leadership module. Here are all of the elements we might want to discuss. And now let's prioritize which are relevant in this case, right? And which we are going to want and which to prioritize in this case. And that's a workshop, that's going to sort of be an extension of the existing prioritization workshop, right? What can we tackle? What do we have the current ability to tackle? And what impact is it going to have? And if you guys remember, we did this at last year's conference. What impact is it going to have on revenues against how ready are we to implement it? And let's start doing an Eisenhower chart on that.
Hey, George.
Yeah, man.
So I forget what you call it, but you got that one pager that's I don't know, a strategic intent page or document.
Yes.
Is that going to be part of this thing you're talking about?
Would you like it to be? Good morning.
Yes.
Anna, Bill. So I am thinking about adding. Okay, so whatever. Okay, so I've done this before, and I will publish this publicly. I mean, I'll say this publicly. We're building a risk management module. The risk management module, it would be logical. I don't know if that's the name that'll be when it goes to market, but the risk management module is intended to be able to uncover things that are outside of a traditional look at our look at the business, right? And the 24 growth driving objectives and time to market. What is this business? So we have equity value plan, or what are the other things that we might consider from an insurance and wealth advising perspective, so because those are I hear it essentially every day. The wealth advisors are a fantastic potential source of clients, qualified wealth advisors. Same comment for qualified CPAs and business attorneys. And interestingly, guys, we're starting to get inbound interest from sales and marketing strategists, okay? And which I find fascinating. Something we're saying is resonating. It's not a market we're chasing, but they are finding us. And so with that in mind, right? Do we want to expand the conversation? Has everyone seen the strategic? I'll pull it up here, Steve. Open strategic.
I know what you're talking about, George. What I have in my mind, it may not be what's in your mind, but is a document that's kind of a discussion starter. Have you guys considered, or gals considered, this laundry list of issues?
Yes. And how do we, there are a lot of things that we could and should, and BEI offers education on this point. Yes, so I want the selected cells. I really want to share this with you guys. It is in save as a PDF, save it. All right, great. I want to see this. That's great. I'm just going to show you my personal, so it's a strategic. Oh, that's handy. Where the hell did I save it? Heck, where the heck did, there it is. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh, he said. Now there's the engineers starting to ping me. So have you guys used this? Steve just referred to it. Have you, for crying out loud? Okay, can you stop? I am in a meeting. I have 14 different ways people can get hold of me. Okay. So show of hands, who has seen this document, the strategy planner? Okay, great.
I
Great.
have not seen this one.
Awesome, Silvana. Well, it is in the community on Circle, and we're getting into why, right? What is your personal vision? Do you have one, or a personal mission? And what we're trying to discover is the shareholder's strategic intent. I need this business, but I use the term vision purposefully. That in a business, in a privately held business, can inform, it may be similar to, inform, or be completely different than our professional vision. Now we get into professional mission, and then break it down. And this is meant to drive a conversation, the growth conversation, right? It's one page, and it's heavily imbued with the growth drive philosophy, right? So you have a personal vision. Mine is to end poverty, right? It is huge. And to the extent that I can have some impact on poverty in my life, it's a complicated topic. I'd be happy to discuss it. Because private businesses are the engines for the pursuit of happiness. You should read Victor Davis Hanson's fabulous book, The Soul of Battle, and Wealth of Democracies and Poor Dictatorships. And it is a fascinating read. Anyway, but that informs my professional vision for this business, to help $1 trillion of privately held businesses increase their strategic capacity, their quality, their ability to thrive in the 3 dimensions of business growth. Great, right? And then that in turn informs our design philosophy for the software. So these, at least for here, these are all connected. And for your client, we need to discover, even if they say, okay, well, I need to take $20 million off the table. Great, let's get into, you guys remember from certification, why? What will that do you? What options will that create? What have you considered? What have you not considered? And what happens if you don't? Great. Okay, now how do we use the business as a lever to meet, that personal intent? Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. So I just wanted to share this. I'm on a roll.
George, just scroll down the document a little bit more.
Sure.
Yeah. And so what I think you've done is you've, in essence, simplified, right, Joe, the EOS form. I forget the name of their form.
Oh, the VTO?
Yeah, that's very
VTO, right. Vision, traction. Somewhat.
Yeah. Somewhat. I love the VTO. It's a great tool. I think this is a different tool, Larry, but you're right. The intent of both tools is the same. Yeah, it's a great tool. Right. And the discipline of having a VTO and getting together as a team and discussing, identifying the rocks and the issues, right, which are essentially the rocks in a parking lot. And that is a fantastic exercise.
Oh, yeah. George, I plan on using this. If I get, there's a client that I might get, I'll know in a week or two. If I do, I think this is perfect way of first going through a process with them, and then they fill out Clarity One. But I want to start with this because Clarity One, then the results will have, I think, better context for me to understand those results lined up to this or not lined up to this. So, thanks.
Awesome.
I think this is based on the business wisdom of Yogi Berra, and Larry knows that I like Yogi's wisdom. You know, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. So that's what this is.
That's exactly right. Well, and that's the growth conversation. So I'm flattered at a comparison to the Vision Traction Organizer. I mean, I guess they have a very similar intent.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it.
We want, so Steve, are you hoping that we code that into the system?
Yeah, I think that, yes.
It would actually make huge sense, because imagine pulling from it reports.
Well,
Okay.
if you believe Yogi, then, I mean, this is fundamental to everything else. Really, if you don't have a direction or a destination in mind, then you're just kind of wandering around.
That is clarity level 1.
By the way, Steve, if you ever come up or anyone visit northern New Jersey here, Yogi lived a town away and only a mile away where he used to hang out. And where he said, when you hit the fork, take it.
Mhm.
I could show you that fork.
Yeah.
He lived on that block. That's why anyway.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
George, tying that into that, clarity early on discussion is just that it kind of helps sort of, you want to answer or ask questions, right? And so that is a really easy way to kind of get some really good learning early on when in answering Larry's question about getting to know a client a little better before you go right into saying, hey, it could help in the early get to know each other phase by having those kind of series of questions. And then also you'll be a better feel for what level they're prepared to go, how deep they're willing to go, because if they haven't gone and done the planning and they're amazingly successful in spite of answering some of these questions, then at least you know how to, direct them going forward. And if they find that they've had this thing nailed down, then they at least feel like that work is not lost. You can build upon it.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're not asking that discovery question and it's saying, have you got your VTO? And that's a matter of fact, if you were to think about it, if a company has spent all that money on trying to get themselves wired in to something like, a business operating system, then you increase your odds of getting that appointment tremendously. It might even be the number one factor in which you filter is if they don't have anything, kick it back to a business coach to have them go through that process and then come back, because without it, it's just a missing link, foundational block that at some point is going to have to happen.
One other point, George.
Qualifying, Joe. Love that you're referring to that. Steve, sorry, man. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No problem. So it's not for everyone, but probably for most. Also on that document, you get the why, and the why often should be the driver for everything.
Yeah.
And why isn't, well, because I need $1 million in EBITDA. It's because I want to support my kids or do XYZ. The soft stuff is the important whys.
Thank you, Steve. I'm gonna cry. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Right. And we don't, as advisors, we often commit the error. Somebody says, I mean, in the worst case, and I call it a sin from an advisory perspective, not religious. Worst case, and I had this happen to me, and from a guy, it really surprised me because he knows better. Somebody says, well, I need to go move from $1 million to 3 million of profit. And we're like, great. Okay, cool. Let's dig in. And let me tell you how we're going to do that. And that's what this guy did. Well, I'm like, you don't even know. You haven't asked me a single question. But Steve, your point's a good one. If we don't understand why, if we don't have a context for that goal, for that strategic intent, and you're going to hear me talk about intent, by the way, a lot. But if we don't have a context for that intent, and if it isn't, is it a pie in the sky or is it intent? Not I want to, it's I intend to. And those are psychologically very different. And those are qualifying questions. It's like, yeah, I know you want to, but do you intend to? Are you going to do what it takes? Are you committed to getting there? Joe, to your exact point. Yeah, man. So
Hey, George, one of my other pet rocks, as you probably remember, is
yep.
KPIs. So if in this thing that you're developing, there could be, okay, now we've established your strategic intent. And what do you think we ought to measure to find out if we're accomplishing that? That may be more than you want to deal with, but that's an important thing to actually get to wherever they want to get to.
Well, and
it's more than the financials. It's all a bunch of other things, operationally, etc.
Well, you'll notice that on business flow on our scorecard, which give me time. The first line is the Moneyball KPI, right? And we need to workshop that. We need to identify the heck out of what is your Moneyball KPI, and it may have a dollar sign, but it may not, right? For one case, I'm very familiar with. The Moneyball KPI is actually an engagement number, because that engagement number drives everything else in the business.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so and if you go and pull the Moneyball KPI, the business flow circle, all you got to do is put it in the search bar, guys, up at the top. Don't drive yourselves crazy. Search for it. I came up with the strategy planner it's now posted in chat if anybody wants it, and you can search for it in Circle. Silvana, I'm sorry.
No, that's a very good point about KPIs. And I know that the tool itself has what you call the OKRs per each of the drivers.
Yeah.
And I guess I see what Steve is talking about. And if I understand it correctly, Steve, you're talking about a more strategic KPIs that actually it's connected to the context of their strategic intent, not just the tactical different OKRs that are measuring where you were and where you want to be or where you came after a year. Is that correct?
Yes.
Larger KPIs than just the OKRs, because
yes,
those OKRs can come up. I mean, I haven't had as many clarity or like growth drive projects as you guys have, but I would assume that some of them will come up as the most important OKRs depending on what the intent is. However, the larger strategic KPIs are connected specifically to the strategic intent of the business owner, right?
It's good that almost. I think that's inclusive, Silvani. I like what you were saying. There is, first off, OKR language confuses the heck out of owners. I mean, some owners don't even know the difference between a goal and a strategy. So OKR language sounds very corporate when we use it. I've learned to just stick with simpler language. But KPIs, and George, when you talk about Moneyball, those are the 1 or 2 KPIs that sit on the top of all the KPIs, because there are too many KPIs, too much data points. And so which 1 or 2 has the greatest significance in truly measuring, are we on track to achieve those OKRs? And that's what Moneyball is. And in addition, if you take a Moneyball like gross margin divided by, if you're sales driven, total income of your salespeople, gross income divided by total income, we're able to then track the value each salesperson
How'd that
brings
go?
to that. And then we're able to make better business decisions by saying, hey, every time I want to add a salesperson, cost in the denominator, what incremental gain will I get in the gross margin? And so that type of global thinking is very strategic. And I think that's in part what you're saying. Steve, I'm not sure if it lines up to what you were saying, though.
Yeah, I think so. Let's just think of it's a manufacturing business, and it's easy to say, well, one of the important things I need to measure of widgets per hour or downtime, things around the factory floor that are direct channel to the revenue numbers or the profit numbers you want to meet.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Sometimes profitability. In fact, I was involved in a manufacturing company where we figured out after a while that that our critical KPI for driving profitability was actually waste, right? And machine time and waste. The KPIs, if in execute guidance, you click on the read more, you'll see a lot of references to KPIs. And who has some experience using AI to identify KPIs or to try to identify KPIs? Has anyone done any work with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is where the human factor is actually incredibly important, because AI can give us some ideas, but they need to be vetted, worked on, screwed up, maybe even workshopped with our clients. We can't simply have AI saying, oh, here's what you're going to do. Beware, because it's always in the context of the whole, right? Always in the context of the whole.
So just to piggyback a little bit on that, I was with a client on Friday, and we were meeting with Ed, and we're going through the growth drive, and what sort of boiled down to is square feet under management, and they're a cleaning contractor. So we came up with this. This is their KPI. This is right. It's like, as we think about a thermostat, and it's as simple as that. It's keep it simple, right? So oftentimes we try to create these. Now, granted, there's a whole other things that make that happen, right? So they think through it, but if you can get that one key piece for them, it's square feet under management, because if they're either buying or selling at some point in the future, that's the litmus test of whether or not you got a successful cleaning contractor. And if they're going to play in what they're calling a laggard market, which I'm trying to get them to think more strategic, but it's all about that, how many square feet you have under contract. So sometimes you just got to help them kind of think through all the noise and just get down to like what's that one thing, like city slickers, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's that one thing.
Agreed.
And if you can get, that's so beautiful. When there's one resource out of Vistage that he's and matter of fact, a client of that we hadn't touched base with him, but presented like 6 years ago. And he said, I want that guy that that did that presentation. And sure enough, he's still doing that presentation. He did a lot of work for Vistage at the time, and one of the things that they determined, it was really about their ability to onboard a new chair was the limiting factor for all their growth.
Yeah.
It was the chair that started the group created the momentum, and then it allowed them to add more and more chairs, just like the LX Council is. LX Council growth, I imagine, is related to their ability to develop and recruit people to run their council team meetings. I don't know what you guys are calling them. We call them chairs, but you have your terminology. But that's the one limiting growth. It's a competent person to put out there and recruit. It's not the people finding the people. It's a matter of having a competency leader to then grow that group.
Yeah,
and that's that was Vistage world. I'm assuming it's not much different.
Now, Vistage has a tremendous failure to launch. Larry, what's the stat?
Vistage when I was
nothing against the organization, right?
No, I thought it was great, and I thought the training was solid. So when I 6+ years ago went to Vistage training to be a chair, there was 25 25 of us in class. I think actually 28, but 3 dropped out during the week. 25 graduated, 2 built a group out of 25.
Yes, they have a very, very low success rate, and that's a different model altogether. But if we could go back to what we're talking about right now, I just want to be clear that we are having the conversation about the KPIs, but the basic assumption I have is that the company has created an optimal running business, because there are companies that are large enough and they still don't know what their basic KPIs are, because their companies are not at the strategic capacity phase, at the growth phase. They are at a making the business easy to run. So I think that there is 2 parts. During the making the business easy to run, along with trying to make the business, help the business owner make the business easy to run, we're also going to be working with them to help define what the KPIs are. And then, at the end of it, after we have defined it, then the growth part comes, where we use those KPIs to refine the strategic growth plan. That's how I see it, right? Because at the beginning, if the business is not easy to run, it's very difficult for different businesses to figure out what is that KPI that actually is the linchpin of achieving the results.
Savannah, this is another opinion. If I could rewrite one of George's questions in the first dimension about financial KPIs, I would rewrite it to be, are you, whatever the question is, but do you do a good job of tracking your KPIs, particularly financials? Because financials are a given, they have to be tracked. But I think it's important to measure other things besides just the financials.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah. And
Correct.
I agree, which is why there's a generic, and we track our KPIs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, it has been
Senior
my
leadership alignment.
experience, getting to the KPIs is not very easy. So we are assuming they know what their KPIs are.
Well,
so what happens?
Part of it's why we're there, though, Savannah, right?
And I would posit that many businesses, especially in the pre-middle market and middle market and lower middle market, do not know what their KPIs are. And guys, do you see
Correct.
this? I mean, we all have a growth reflex, and I'm kicking a knee here. We all, as business owners, have a growth reflex, right? But they don't know what they don't know, and they're often measuring things that are partway through the pipeline of things they should be measuring, right? And they should be measuring square feet under management, or subscribers, or what there's generally, very often, more often than not, one thing that when we really focus on, and we can get it wrong, right? Because you'll figure out, if you're using business flow, you'll figure out relatively quickly that you're measuring the wrong. This metric isn't driving it, right? And just looking at the P&L in the rear view mirror, or the cash flowing through the checking account, those are not KPIs, right?
Well,
No.
Those are results. Yeah.
They're lagging indicators. And
Lagging
you're
indicators.
talking about is, and most business owners don't do this, they need to be measuring the leading indicators. So I don't know where the dividing line is, where they become geniuses about KPIs, but it's probably substantially up the revenue chain. So I think part of our job is to help them find those, define the appropriate leading indicators, KPIs.
Hey, Bob, you've been uncharacteristically quiet. You're making me nervous, man. How are you?
Good. Today I'm just kind of listening, George. I mean, it's
Okay.
so you keep talking about these KPIs and this AI stuff. So we are doing a workshop.
Oh,
We have a
I
workshop
did not know this, guys.
on the 14th of August, where we're having 12 CEOs come in, and we're going to have AI going, but it's all based on distributors and manufacturers. That's our segment. And we're going to actually figure out the problems that they have AI analyze that while we're right there, and then basically solve one right there. So you talk about, how can AI help? And so that's what we're going to be using. So the guy that we're doing it with knows AI inside and out. That's why we're doing that. So
Awesome.
that should be interesting.
Yeah, it will be interesting. Are you planning or considering having your attendees complete Clarity One before they come into the room?
At this point, George, no, but
Okay.
we're kind of it's kind of like, hey, let's get them into the workshop and then kind of see, because that's all going to blend into AI and growth drive. That's kind of the whole thing. That's our kind of our model. We're going to add I think we're going to add AI to our process and say, how can AI help your business? Because you're talking about potential, because you can put into AI, what are some leading indicators for paint companies, or what are some leading indicators for people that manufacture blank?
Mhm.
And you kind of let AI kind of help you, and it helps. I don't mean it helps if you kind of know some industry places, that you might want to find out this information. So you go to, you might want, you take a look at abc.com, whatever that happens to be, and you help drive it there and kind of analyze some of that. So that's going to be we're kind of expanding growth drive a little bit.
That is super cool. Bob, I'd love to have a side conversation with you. I think many people on this call are going to be down at the conference in our summit in September. And Bob, what you're describing is something that might be a really interesting case, because we're going to be talking about AI and technology, especially on Tuesday morning. So I'd love to have a sidebar about what you're planning to do, what that's going to look like, what you're hoping it's going to deliver. And so you're doing that on August 12th, you said?
August the 14th.
August 14th. Okay, so well in advance, 6 weeks before. Very cool. Looking for anything I can do to help. Please let me know.
Yeah, but let's do have a conversation, because I do want to talk with you about a couple things.
Okay.
I would add George's not typical, but his occasional cautionary tale. It's nice to use AI, but those AIs are programmed to provide the average answer. They don't know if in this particular manufacturing facility you've got a machine that's particularly critical, and the appropriate KPI is the vibration level of that particular machine. So be careful of the generic answer.
Yeah.
So I know.
Yeah.
And thank you. I really appreciate that, Steve. So the other thing I find is it's worth getting the paid version. You get so much more.
Yes.
If you just do the free version, it doesn't think but you can see it thinking when you get the paid version. I use Perplexity.
Don't you? Who here is using Perplexity like routinely? I've actually started using it. If I get bored with my book, let's say I wake up at 2:00 in the morning, never happens. But Perplexity, actually, I can go down a rabbit hole. I just went down one about, they just found this they found the Spanish galleon off of, it has $21 billion worth of treasure, right, off the coast of Colombia. And Perplexity allows you to go down a really fascinating rabbit hole about whatever topic. I ended up, deep in research about the War of Spanish Succession, and Perplexity and the paid version of Perplexity are really powerful.
Yeah. Hey, Sylvana's had her hand up for a while.
You beat me to it, Steve. Thanks. Sylvana, what's up?
Thank you. Okay, so I find the discussion we have so far very helpful and very fascinating, because often I get the question about strategic growth sort of advisory and coaching, and the industry specific companies, and how does our framework apply to different industries. And then I was listening to Steve talking about vibration of the machine, or like in the services perspective from Joe, it's like square foot under service and other one. And I feel like something that our group needs to start talking a little bit more about is what is the portion of the either KPIs, OKRs, or the framework that regardless of the industry applies the same, which is a huge part of it. And then what are some industry specific nuances and KPIs that actually, matter? Because we're talking about services industry, and we're talking about manufacturing, we're talking about technology, we're talking about government consulting, a lot of other ones. And every one of them has got their nuances. And very often, I personally have put forward with everybody that I work with is that my thesis is that every business has got a certain percentage of the running of the business and the OKRs that, regardless of your industry, are the same. And then there is a certain smaller percentage which is industry specific or nuanced based on what makes you as a business. But we haven't talked much about it. So I wanted to raise that.
Well, Silvana, you're hitting on some great points. And this gets into it's an ancillary point. Let's take a manufacturing business. And let's say Silvana, I'm just going to use you as my case. Let's just say, I don't know how much experience you have with manufacturing, but
I do actually.
Okay, so let's say you don't. That doesn't mean, so the 3 dimensions of growth is being used across industries and across demographics, from micro businesses, 350,000 a year, business. I'm sure it's being used pre-revenue, but I those get cut off in the when I look at analytics. Up to 264 million, I think, is the biggest business that's in the system. Now, you do not need to have, let's take a manufacturing business. You can be the co-driver with the CEO. You can be their guide, right?
Good one.
Good one. Thank you, Zoom. You can be their guide, but this goes to subject matter expertise. You do not need to be a lean manufacturing subject matter expert. You do need, this is where AI can be helpful. You need to say, who could I talk to about manufacturing best practices? And in every state in this country, and I have experience working with a lot of them, there are manufacturing extension partnerships in which there are specialists in lean manufacturing. And so you can bring one of them in, especially if it's if it's something that's funded by the government, although, well, you can bring them in for low or no dollars to say, what are we not? Look at what we're doing. What are we not doing? What could we be doing better? So that doesn't mean you can't have a role. It's going to give me hearts again, isn't it? That you can't have a role. I'll just stop talking with my hands. You can't have a role in the manufacturing business or a medical, a biotech business. You can have a role because the business fundamentals transcend industries and they transcend demographics. General Electric is operating in the 3 dimensions of business growth right now. Now it gets super complicated, right? Because there's so much going, so many people ultimately, which means so many processes, which means, so I hope that was helpful.
No, you did. I think you and I are on the same page. My thesis is that you're right. We don't have to be specialized in certain verticals like with Lean Six Sigma. I've been lucky that I did it at Booz Allen.
Yeah.
But
now I remember that now. Sorry, Silvana. Yeah.
Our strength is asking the right questions, even if we're not a Lean Six Sigma, because we're I mean, in a way, we're one step removed from being down in the dirty little every little process, and we're looking at the bigger picture and asking the right questions to tease out, you know, KPIs that are beyond just the bigger, you know, easy to spot KPIs for the particular business. That's what I was trying to say. But anyway, I just wanted to open the conversation for us, just in case that we have some use cases that we can share in a regular basis here to just sort of highlight certain subjects that we're talking about in concept.
Yeah. Larry.
Yeah, that's a good conversation for us to continue with. And I want to pull, Joe, from your one thing and take from Vern Harnish's Scaling Up that Bob and George are familiar with. And that is this concept, there you go, of this one thing that, regardless of the industry or even the size of the business, called this one thing called Moneyball, is a KPI that matters, almost the same KPI for every industry. And then every company has something unique, Steve, to your point before. For example, what was Southwest Airlines phrase
Wheels up.
they used?
Wheels up.
Wheels up, that's their KPI. The percent of time that those wheels are up in the air versus as scheduled, per schedule, compared to it being on the ground. So what is that for business? Well, according to Vern from Scaling Up, there is one, and that's gross margin, not revenue, not EBITDA, gross margin divided by total non-management salary, because that allows you to see the productivity and the cost to people to that of gross margin. You could break that up by product line, business market, sales. You could do that, but ultimately gross margin by total income and cost of employees is the best gauge, and that holds for any industry. So that's his submission or thesis.
Yeah.
From Vern.
So it would be interesting they just changed Southwest to go ticketed seats, assigned seats. That's a major change for them. And I think it's going to slow their wheels up. But what they found, their customers, 85% of them want to have a ticketed seat. And, you know, but their thought process was this whole cattle call expedited. Like, I think it was like 5 minutes sooner they can get up in the air. So, you know, sometimes you got to go back and listen to the customer and maybe change some of the operational efficiency things to so it'd be interesting to see how it all works out, but they're changing their whole ticketing program from A, B, and C.
You know, it's interesting, Southwest, and just a real quick aside, Southwest, so when I lived in Dallas, they were relatively new on the national stand when they all flying out of Love Field. Southwest has gone from being the inexpensive, you know, the Breeze. Right now we have Breeze, right? That's the inexpensive provider. And you had an inexpensive experience. They've been able to up that experience and up their prices, up the quality of their fleet. And they are now not the low cost provider. They are the wheels up. That metric, wheels up, has allowed them to be a premium and to compete with the legacy airlines. And Joe, did you notice that in response to, I would assume in response to Southwest's announcement, Delta has said, hey, we're actually changing the way we board the planes, and we're going to go window, middle, aisle, and sort of start loading from the back up, because we think it's going to take 2 minutes off of our wheels up time. And it's interesting to see the impact that I'm a little sad. I love the cattle call. I put in early bird. I pay my extra bucks. I say, hey, are you an A5? I'm A3, and get on the plane, right? And sit in the front. I just want to get off first. But it's fascinating the impact that this is that decision is having on the industry. Anyway, Steve, man, fire away.
Another couple of miscellaneous comments. So one, I guess, fundamental business thing is everyone in the business has a number. You know, everyone in the business has a KPI. So the business may have one number or one KPI, but each individual has something that contributes to that one. And then secondly, no one has stated this, but presumably all these KPIs we've been talking about will end up equaling some of the R's in the OKRs that we develop.
Yes,
It's all connected.
it's all connected. Yeah, man. You know, I tell the story of that business we built in Dallas. Probably the most fun, heck of an experience. But the one thing that the CEO insisted on, there were others, obviously, but we had a one ring policy. And imagine if when the phone rings, instead of it ringing it was the first ring would be at the reception desk. We went from having one to having 4 people manning that phone. And then the second ring went to every desk in the business. Think about the cultural impact. And if it went on to every desk and went to a third ring, God help us all. Because Chip rightly was like, I paid every time that phone, and we knew, I forget, I think it was $64. Every time the phone rang, the business earned $64. We were that tight on understanding leads to revenues and lag time. And I forget the lag time, guys. It's been 20 years. But I think it was $64 every time. And he's like, I mean, he was incredibly focused on that number. It becomes the culture, right? So anyway, guys, we have 5 minutes left. This has been a great rolling conversation. If with the 5 minutes that are left, would it be okay if we went around, and I'd love to hear what each of you are taking away from this conversation? Would that be okay? Cool. Silvana, you're in my upper left. I'm going to go Silvana, and I'll go around the horn this way.
I think that the KPI conversation has been very helpful.
Awesome. And you're gonna is it something you can apply in how you do what you do?
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Bob.
I just always enjoy just kind of learning all sorts of different stuff. And Larry, I appreciate you reminding me about the burnt harness thing about the gross margins. I forgot about that. And Kathy's not here right now, but I will remind her of that. So I think that will be helpful. Can you say it one more time, Larry, please? Gross margin.
Yes. So gross margin divided by non-management costs. And my whole peer group and all my clients, I've been connecting this to the scorecard of OKRs or goals, strategies, key results. And it really gets everyone thinking differently. But it has to be a commitment around 1 or 2 Moneyball.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, thanks. Awesome. Thank you, Bob. Joe.
Yeah, so I just enjoy conversation and really try to how you're bringing some of the basically business operating systems tools to forward. And I've been talking about how to help other growth drivers playing a role in getting that part of it done, and then allow them to do the executional work or the architectural work. So
there are a lot of great tools out there. The VTO, the one-page business plan, and we want to really focus in on strategic intent. Bill Dunnington, is there a deck already built, or should I start? Bill asked, gearing up for an info briefing with mid-market investors. Very cool. Including some impact, is some impact investor. Is there a deck already built I should start with? Bill, let's talk, because I know we definitely have resources that will be helpful. So happy to. Bill, since you're up, yeah, any key takeaway from today? Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, well, this fits perfectly with my experience with balanced scorecard stuff, and starting with a big list and winnowing things down to what really matters. I haven't tried using AI with that yet, but I totally agree with you guys. There are some things that are ubiquitous, they're common to everyone, and then there's some things that are nuanced and different and ought to be factored in. So and that's where I think we can be especially helpful whether we're bringing a specialist or not. So good
Absolutely.
stuff.
Thanks, Bill. Guys, great workshop. Remember, this is from Andy Weevil. Could, should, must, will. What a workshop. What is everything we could do, should do, must do, will do? Winnowing it down.
Forgot about that.
Larry and Steve, you're my last two. Who wants to go first?
Larry's writing, so I'll.
Yeah.
KPIs are a big deal, so they're an important part of getting correct to help a business be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll underscore that everybody has a a number. I think Gino makes that point. I know Vern makes that point. I'll make that point. It's true. And it's in the methodology, right? Let's figure out. And little digression, the dignity of knowing you've done your job well, what you're supposed to do and what it means to do it well, and going home at the end of the day with being able to give yourself a pat on the back. Incredibly important to our satisfaction as employees. Larry, that leaves you, man.
Well, this is great. I appreciate it. Thanks for the reminder of the one-page strategy planner. I'm going to add to that planner BHAG, that big, hairy, audacious goal that I want to fit into that conversation. So I'm going to add BHAG to that. Even remind me, could do, will do, should do, must do exercise. I'm going to weave that in as well. I have a different way of doing that, but I like that way. And also I'm really looking forward to the whole risk tool you're developing that I think can be that bridge for the work I do, which is not financial and wealth specifically, to the financial planner, wealth planner. And I think that is going to be exciting. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Larry. My key takeaway is very simple, and it's kind of, I learn from you guys every week, and I want to say thank you. So my key takeaway is gratitude. Thank you guys. Super helpful. And I'm looking forward. Go into your dashboards, check out Simulator. Simulator has 2 tabs, and leadership. And leadership is a report at the end of the day. It's a scorecard, right, on these executive functions. And we'll be talking about both of those tomorrow in our webinar. Okay, guys, thank you very much. We're just past the bottom of the hour. This was super fun, as it is every week. Thank you. Anything I can do to help you guys, please email, call, write. And Bill's going to call me. Bob, you and I are going to talk maybe later this
George,
week.
you have 60 seconds right after. Stay on right here. Okay.
I will stand.
Good.
Guys, have a great week.
See you guys.
I'll talk to you soon. Thank you. I'm going to stop recording somewhere here. There it is.